Hi there, folks. How y'all doing? Clay Steele here. Just around the campfire telling stories and enjoying your company. Now, I think that's what we ought to do tonight. Come on in, sit down, sit around this fire with me. I want to tell you a story. In fact, I've been telling you a story about the Coyote. He was an outlaw, bad luck guy. Well, this is the final 3 chapters I'm going to read you tonight. We'll see what happens now. Let's just find out how sharp this guy is if he can get out of trouble for good. And this was written by James Roberts a while back. So, starting with chapter 35, Guns in the Night. Well, when Joe Price returned, leading Wrathburn's horse, which he had fed and watered, and turned over the reins, he spoke swiftly in a low voice. "Now they're going to be watching hard for you down the canyon, boy. Bob Long's sure to mean business this ere time." "Well, I know it," said Wrathburn with a low, mirthless laugh. "I locked him in his own jail this morning to get a clean chance to decide to give myself up. Then, when the chance came, well, he surely thinks now that I put him away to cover my tracks. I expect the boys have got their shooting orders." "Listen," whispered Price excitedly. "Wait till I get my own horse, and I'll strike east across the hump. That'll start 'em after me, maybe. Sure it will, Wrathburn. They'll think I'm you, see, and light right out after me." Wrathburn laid one hand on the old man's shoulder and put the other over Joe's mouth. "Joe, you're all excited, plump, unreasonable excited. You know I wouldn't let you do that. Now don't hand me more worries than what I've got. Be good, Joe." He patted Price's shoulder, then swung into the saddle. The old miner looked up at him, his face showing strangely white in the dim starlight, pierced by the fire on the peak. "I didn't tell him you'd been here, Roger. Don't forget that." "Oh, I knew that, Joe," Wrathburn chuckled. "So long." Swiftly he rode down that little meadow below the spring into the deep shadows of the canyon, which led down a steep trail to the desert. Presently he checked his pace until he was walking the gallant done. He wished to avoid as much noise as possible and to save his horse for a final spurt down 9 miles of desert to the Mallerie Ranch from the mouth of the canyon, providing he got out. For 2 reasons he had deliberately chosen this route. It was the shortest, and it offered the best going. He must save the Dun's strength, and Wrathburn knew the limits of his splendid mount. He knew they had almost been reached. He knew there was just enough left in this horse to make the ranch without killing him. The Coyote would surrender before he would kill his horse to effect his escape or gain an objective. And thus they slipped down that narrow canyon with the desert stars gleaming white above the lava hills of Imagination Range, while the fire glowed on the peak above Joe Price's cabin. Wrathburn's face was pale under his tan. His thoughts were in turmoil, but his lips were pressed into a fine line that denoted an unwavering determination. Had Sheriff Bob Long seen his face at this time, he might have glimpsed another angle of Wrathburn's many-sided character, an angle which would have given him pause. Wrathburn looked behind, and his eyes narrowed. 2 fires were burning on the peak. Already the watchers were cognizant of his latest move and were signaling to those who might be below. He wondered vaguely why they had not surrounded Joe Price's cabin while he'd been there. Then he realized he had been there hardly long enough for his pursuers to get there in any real numbers, and suddenly his thoughts were broken into by a streak of red in the canyon depths below him. He swerved close against the rock wall, drew his gun, and speaking to the Dun, drove in his spurs. A short distance below he could see the faint glow of the starlight night, and he knew he was near the canyon's mouth. There were more streaks of red, and bullets whistled past him. Then Wrathburn raised his gun and sent half its deadly contents crashing down the trail ahead. There followed a few moments of quiet, broken only by the harsh ringing pound of his mount's hoofs. Wrathburn could see open country just ahead. Then a flash of fire came from almost underneath him, and the big dun lunged into the air, half twisting, and came down upon some object under its hooves. The dun bounded on in great leaps, literally flying through the air, as Wrathburn thrilled with the knowledge that the horse had knocked down the man who had sought to kill him. From above came the sharp reports, and the blackness of the high canyon walls was streaked with spurts of flame. Leaden death hurled itself into the rock trail behind him. Then he was out of the canyon, riding like mad through the white desert night toward his goal, the Mallerie Ranch. Laura Mallerie stood on the porch of the little ranch house, staring out across the dimly lit spaces of desert. A worried look appeared in her eyes. The front door was open, and in the small sitting room her father was reading under a shaded lamp at the table. At times the worried look in the girl's eyes would change to one of wistfulness, and twice the tears welled. Presently she straightened and listened intently, looking into the south instead of the northwest. Her ears, keen as those are of the desert-born, had caught a sound, a succession of faint sounds, in the still night air. Gradually the sound became more and more distinct, and the worried expression of her face increased. She hurried into the sitting room. "Father, Fred Doane is coming out from town," she said breathlessly. "Do you suppose they've got him?" "Maybe so, girlie," said the old man. "It was a bold business, and what could you expect?" "Oh, I don't know. I can't seem to understand. All this trouble is coming so suddenly. Father, are you sure you heard Roger refuse to aid that man, Egan, in some shady scheme last night?" "Absolutely," declared Mallerie. "I've been wondering, daughter, if he didn't turn Egan down because he had this scheme of his own." The purr of a motor came to them from outside, and Laura, hastily wiping her eyes with a small handkerchief, went slowly out. "Laura!" cried Fred Doane as he came up the steps, holding out his hands. What is it, Fred?" she faltered. "Have they caught—" "No, not yet," said Doane briskly, as Mallerie appeared in the door. "And they probably won't get him. He's clever, that fella." The bank cashier indulged in a frown, but he was plainly nervous. "Then what news do you bring here?" Mallerie demanded. "Did you come to tell us he got away clean?" "Why, not exactly," said Doane. "I meant to tell you that, of course, but I also went to have a little talk with Laura. Can I see you alone, Laura, for a few minutes?" "Oh, that's it," snorted Mallerie as he stamped back into the house. "You have something to tell me that you don't want Father to hear?" asked the girl in a worried voice. "Laura, now there's something I must tell you right away," said Doane nervously, leading her to the shadow of the far end of the porch, and there he turned and faced her, taking her hands. "Laura, you must have seen it for a long time. You could hardly help but see it. I love you, Laura. I love you with all my heart, and I want you to be my wife." The girl drew back in astonishment. "But why do you have to tell me this so suddenly?" she asked, her color coming and going. "Because I want you to marry me, Laura, tonight," he said. Again he reached for her hands. "Please, Laura," he pleaded. "It means so much to me. Don't you care for me, sweetheart? I've been led to think you did, and I intended to tell you soon, but all this trouble, this terrible trouble today, has nearly driven me mad. I'm afraid I'll go mad, Laura, if I don't have something else to think about. Oh, Laura, marry me and help me out of this big trouble." "Fred!" exclaimed the girl, startled by his passion of pleading. "Fred, I'd never tried to make you think I cared for you, and now, well, I'd have to have a long time to think it over. How would it help you out of trouble, Fred? Tell me that." "Well, by helping me forget that our bank is ruined, by saving my mind, by keeping me from going mad, by—" "Fred, you must not talk so. That robbery has unnerved you for the time being, that's all. You're excited, and so—" "No, I'm more than excited," he declared, trying to put his hands on her shoulders. "I'm about gone." Laura, marry me tonight and we'll go somewhere. We'll go somewhere right from here, from this very ranch. We'll go a long way and get married in the morning. Then we can stay away for a short time till I get to be myself again." "No, Fred," replied the girl in convincing tones. "I can't. It would be asking too much even if I did love you. Now come inside and I'll make you some strong tea. You can talk to Father and me and regain control of yourself." There was a moment of silence. Mallerie with the lamp had come to the door at the sound of Doan's loud voice. He was looking at him. Then out of the night came the pound of hooves. There was no mistaking the sound. Doan whirled around as a rider came out of the sea of mesquite and greasewood and flung himself from the saddle in front of the porch. The bank cashier turned towards Mallerie. His face was haggard. He seemed to sway as the rider came stamping up the steps. He darted for the door, but had hardly got inside before the rider caught him and made him face about. Mallerie hurried in with the lamp, followed by the girl. Doan was quailing before the new arrival. Both cried out as they saw it was Egan who had broken out so suddenly. Egan towered above the shrinking Doan. "So you thought you'd double-cross me, did you, huh?" came Egan's harsh voice, and he slapped Doan in the face. Doan went red, then white. For a moment, intense hatred and anger flashed in his eyes, but he made no move to avenge the insult. Slowly, the light in his eyes died again to fear, as he realized his inability to cope with this man of strength. "Now here, Egan, you can't come into my house and act like that," said Mallerie stoutly, putting the lamp on the table. Now Laura still stood in the doorway, stunned by the rapid and extraordinary turn of events. Egan turned on Mallerie with a snarl. "Shut up, you old fool. Don't butt in where you ain't wanted and on something you don't know nothing about." "I know you're in my house," Mallerie retorted sternly. "I'll only be here a minute," said Egan with a sneer. "I'm going out of your house, and I'm going to drag this sneaking cur out with me, out onto the solid ground and give him what he's got coming to him. And then," he added in a terrible voice, "I'm going to go out and get his partner, Wrathburn, the Coyote. Get him what the others can't come within a mile of him." "You can't take this man out of my house when he is my guest," thundered Mallerie. "No?" asked Egan contemptuously. "Well, you just watch and see. If you try to stop me, you'll stop lead." He leaped forward and grasped Doan by the shoulders, jerked him forward, and stepped backwards himself. He turned, dragging his victim, then stopped dead in his tracks with a hissing intake of breath. Wrathburn was standing quietly in the doorway. Chapter 36. The Loot. In the heat of the threats and the counter-threats which had been in progress, none of the occupants of the room had heard the newest arrival thunder up to the porch and leap from the saddle to the steps. Egan was dumbfounded by Wrathburn's sudden appearance. He saw that the girl was standing now in the front corner of the room with her hands crossed on her breast, a look of horror in her eyes. Slowly, Egan recovered. He loosed his hold on Doan, who staggered weakly to the table and leaned against it. Egan's sneer returned to his thick lips, and his narrowed gaze traveled quickly to a sack which Wrathburn held in his left hand. Egan's eyes shone with fury. "Come here to fix up the divvy?" he choked. "I knew it was a put-up job between you and Doan. And I figure you'd maybe meet around here, where Doan would be sure to come and try and take this woman with him." Wrathburn eyed him calmly. There was something of a deadly calm in his very posture as he stood just within the threshold. He looked past Egan to Doan, then he tossed the sack on the table. "Here's the money I took this morning, Doan," he said in matter-of-fact tone. "I came here to turn it over to you." With bulging eyes, Doan stared at him, and Egan laughed loudly. "Well, that's rich, trying to make me think you was going to give it all to him. Don't you figure, Mr. Coyote, that I could throw my rope around a simple scheme like you and that shivering rat over there cooked up. That's why you turned down my little proposition last night. It was this same deal, only me and Doan there was going to put it over. You figured I'd cut you out of your divvy, and you figured right. He suspected I might double-cross him. And maybe he was right, too. So he cooked it up with you to pull the robbery, thinking you'd be more likely to go through and give him his end. But the pair of you figured too many points when you thought I wouldn't catch on. So that's what your proposition was to be, was it? Asked Wrathburn pleasantly. Rob the bank? Why, I didn't need the gang to rob the bank, Egan, and I didn't have anybody in with me. The trouble with you is that you've got too much imagination. The drawl in which Wrathburn concluded his speech drove Egan to a frenzy. You lie, Wrathburn! And Wrathburn just smiled at him. I might as well tell you that I intended to get away with that money that's on the table, Egan. That's what I took it for. I'm making this little statement because something's liable to happen to one or both of us. I didn't know Doan was cashier of the bank when I took it. I only recently learned that fact, and then I brought it back to turn it over to him, not so much on his account as on account of Miss Mallerie. You see, I understand Doan is a very good friend of Miss Mallerie, and I wouldn't want his bank hurt for that reason. It was Laura Mallerie who cried out at this. She walked towards Wrathburn, although he did not look at her. Why did you do it, Roger? She asked him in a trembling voice. I can't tell you that, ma'am, he said. But I know, she cried. I've guessed it. You saw Mr. Doan and me together in Hope today and remembered that he was at the ranch last night and... Don't say any more, Laura, Wrathburn commanded sternly. Be still, daughter. It's best, said Mallerie. Neither she nor you nor Doan nor all of you together can talk me out of it, roared Egan. It was a frame-up. In the deadly stillness that followed, Laura Mallerie shrank back from the sight of two gunmen looking steadily into each other's eyes, their hands ready for the lightning draw, each waiting for the merest suggestion of the beginning of a move on the part of the other to get his weapon into action. But the draws did not come. His pregnant silence was broken by the thunder and roll of many horses galloping into the yard about the house. There, yelled Egan in a voice of triumph. There's your sweet little posse, Coyote. I expected to see Bob Long when I come down here, said Wrathburn coolly, looking at Laura Mallerie for the very first time. Chapter 37, The Test of a Man. Several men stamped across the porch to the jingle of spur chains. Others broke in through the back door and entered the kitchen. Sheriff Bob Long appeared at the door with two guns leveled. Why, you're covered from both doors and all the windows, Wrathburn, he said sharply. That's almost just what I thought, Sheriff, Wrathburn drawled. Long stepped into the room, shoving his guns into their holsters. Many other guns were covering Wrathburn. What's the meaning of all this, anyway? Demanded Long with a puzzled expression on his face. His eyes widened as he saw the bag of money on the table. Now, is that the money that was taken from your bank this morning, Mr. Doan? He asked sharply. Doan nodded weakly. The sheriff looked at Wrathburn curiously. You brought it back? You was up to Joe Price's place. Yeah, I brought it back, Sheriff, said Wrathburn cheerfully. Well, I'll be frank and tell you, Wrathburn, that if you expect leniency after what happened this morning, you might as well just give up on that idea. Any man can change his mind when he sees he can't get away. Well, that's up to you, Sheriff, replied Wrathburn, taking tobacco and papers from his shirt pocket. As I was just telling our friend, Mr. Egan here, I brought it back on purpose, and I expected to see you when I got here. I came near not getting here at that. You took a long chance, scowled Long, but it won't get you much now at this stage of the game, especially after the way you led me to believe this morning that you were thinking of giving yourself up. Egan's laugh startled them all. He brought it back to give it up, and himself too? He jeered. He brought it back, Sheriff, because he and that rat of a Doan planned this thing. Coyote got away with the money and came back here to divvy up with Doan. Didn't Doan make the same kind of proposition to me? Didn't he tell me he was short in his accounts and it could be covered up if the bank was robbed? For then he could say more money was took than really was. I'll say he did, and I was going to see if he'd go through with it, and then I was going to wise you up so we could get him cold. With knitted brows, the sheriff stared at Egan, then looked at the white-faced Doan. Tell him I'm telling the truth, shouted Egan at that shaken bank cashier. You can't get out of it. There was a tense moment, and Doan shook his head weakly. He was a picture of guilt. He got scared I wouldn't go through with the play, Sheriff, Egan continued. Thought maybe I'd make it off with all the kale. So he framed it with Wrathburn, and I caught him about to divide it here. He lies, screamed Doan. I didn't frame it with Wrathburn, and I can prove it. That man, he pointed a shaking finger at Egan, has come to me with threats and made me take securities I knew was stolen. There's some of 'em in the bank now, and some of the stuff he took from the stage driver yesterday is there. He's pulled job after job. Egan, recovering from his amazement at the man's outbreak, leaped and drove his powerful fist against Doan's jaw, knocking him nearly the length of the room, where he crashed with his head against the stones of the fireplace. Egan turned quickly, his eyes was blazing red. You're the man, he yelled wrathfully. You're that yellow coyote. His right hand went to his gun as there came a crashing report. He staggered back, trying to get out the weapon which had not even left his holster. He sank down to his knees, still glaring death at the man above him, still fumbling at his gun. Then he lurched forward onto his face. Wrathburn flipped his smoking pistol so that its barrel landed in his hand. Then he tendered it, butt foremost, to Sheriff Bob Long. Long took it and threw it on the table, looking first at Wrathburn and then at the dead man on the floor. He waved towards the doors and the windows. You boys can draw back, he ordered. Mallerie stepped to the fallen Doan. The man's face had set up in a white cast. He felt his heart. He did for him, he said, rising. Laura Mallerie came walking slowly up to the sheriff. Her face was ghastly after what she had just witnessed. Sheriff Long, she said in a voice strangely calm. We heard Egan, she shuddered as she mentioned his name, ask Mr. Wrathburn last night to help with some job that he would get them a lot of money. It may be that Fred did plan such a thing, I'm sorry to say it, but Fred had seemed awfully nervous lately, and tonight he came to me and asked me to run away with him, at once. He seemed horribly afraid of something. Anyway, Roger refused to go in with Egan, and an examination of Fred's books will tell all. She hesitated. Then she spoke slowly and softly. I know why Roger robbed the bank. And stop, Laura, cried Wrathburn. No, said Laura firmly. You may be going to prison. He put out one hand in protest. Turning again to the sheriff, she said, Roger did go to town last night, intending to give himself up, and I knew he was going to do it by the way he looked at me. But today he saw me with Mr. Doan, and maybe he's heard things for which there was no warrant. Anyway, I know he thought I was in love with Fred. Laura, please, Wrathburn pleaded. And tonight, said the girl in triumph, he heard Fred was cashier of the bank he'd robbed, and he brought the money back because he thought the robbery would hurt Fred, and in that way hurt me. At that, Wrathburn turned appealingly to the sheriff. "Let's go," he urged. "He robbed that bank because he thought I had betrayed his trust, Sheriff Long," cried Laura, her eyes a-shining. "Are we going, Long?" cried Wrathburn in an agony. A sheriff stepped to the door and called to some of his men, who entered and bore the bodies of Doane and Egan out of the sitting room. Then he took the money sack from the table and indicated to Wrathburn to follow him. As he went out the door, Wrathburn went after him quickly, and the girl ran to the porch. Wrathburn drew back with a cry as he reached the porch. Just beyond the steps, a horse was lying on its side. My hoss?" he cried wonderingly. He leaped down beside the dead beast. Then he saw crimson upon the animal's shoulder, as a little gleam of light came from the door. "That was why he jumped on the trail. He was hit. He carried me all this way with a bullet in him and then dropped. One of Long's men shot him." Wrathburn looked about vacantly. Then he sunk down and buried his face on the shoulder of the dun. As Sheriff Long turned away, Laura Mallerie stepped quickly to the side of the sheriff and touched his arm. "Is he as bad as you think, Sheriff?" Long scowled at her in the dim light from the door, took out a thick black cigar, bit the end off savagely, and began to chew it. He walked abruptly out to where some of his men were standing by their horses, and he said something in an undertone. When he returned, Wrathburn had taken the saddle and bridle off of the dead horse and was throwing the leather on the porch. "Yours, Dad," he called to Mallerie. "I wouldn't use 'em again if I could." And then he turned to the sheriff. "All right, Bob." "Come inside," said Long gruffly. Chapter 38. 10 Miles Start. When they were in the sitting room, the sheriff confronted Wrathburn. "This has been the strangest case for me," he said slowly, with an attempt at harshness. "Now, I knew Egan was up to a lot of dirty work, but I could never fasten anything on him till tonight. I'll get some of the rest of the gang now. Doane showed in his face that he was guilty. Those things don't worry me none. But you are the hardest character I ever had to handle, Wrathburn." "I don't figure on giving you any more trouble, Sheriff," Wrathburn assured him, smiling. "And that's the puzzle of it," Long exploded. "That puts it up to me. I know you had reason for giving Gomez his, and I know this girl wouldn't lie about the others, but, well, I just don't get you at all, Wrathburn, and that's a fact. Something tells me I've got to give you a chance, and if I knew what tells me this, I'd wring its neck." He stepped close up to Wrathburn and looked him straight in the eye. "Take one of Mallory's horses. He got some good ones. I'll give you 10 miles in any direction. If you can make it, it's your candy. But remember, Wrathburn, I'm going to try to stop you." He walked swiftly out the door, leaving Wrathburn staring at the smiling girl. Laura stepped close to him and nodded. Wrathburn shook his head. "I can't see where I've got the right to give Long any more trouble." "But he isn't letting you go, Roger. He's putting it up to you, and he means just what he says when he declares he'll try to get you. And if he does, he'll probably get me," mused Wrathburn. "But maybe he won't get us, Roger." "Us?" "You and I, Roger. Listen. There's land way up north, Roger. I've read about it. It's past the desert and the mountains and the plains. It's in another country. And there's a river there, Roger, a river they call the Peace River. I've always loved the name. We'll go there, Roger, you and I. And Father can come later." She looked up at him with shining eyes and put her arms about his neck, and she saw the unbelievable wonder in his face. The man trembled. Then he took her and held her and kissed her, time after time. "Joe Price said I could never be satisfied away from the desert unless I took along something that was of it," he muttered hoarsely. "I wonder—" "Yes, Roger, he meant me." "We can't make it," he said softly, "not the two of us. But Laura, girlie, this is worth the game." "Yes, we can, Roger," she said eagerly. "Think. We can be married when we've left the desert. It's not quite 10 miles to Boxall Canyon. We can go up Boxall over the range and cross Death Flat." "I was thinking of that, sweetheart," he replied. "But no horse can get up Boxall, and if he did, he couldn't get across Death Flat. Few men have crossed that stretch. It's well named. I might try it alone, but no, Laura. It just ain't in the pictures. We don't need horses, Roger. You've forgotten the burros. They'll kill any horse on the desert." "Won't they? We can take 2 or 3 loaded with food and water, but it's miles and miles and then some, and it all looks alike. But when we've reached the other side, Roger—" He drew away from her and stepped to the door. He could not see or hear anything when he turned and again approached her. His face was white. He looked at Mallerie, who was standing with a look of stupefaction on his lined face. "Wait," he said, and he stepped into another room. And in a few moments he was back, holding a money belt in his hands. He took out gold and bills and deposited the money on the table. And the others stared at him. "There's about 6,000 there, Mallerie. It's gambling money. Turn it into the bank to make it or help out Doan's shortage. I've got just 2,500 left, which I earned in a better way." "Daddy, get the burros," cried the girl. "We're going." Well, Sheriff Bob Long looked down from a ledge above a narrow, deep, boulder-strewn, awe-inspiring canyon, and drew in his breath sharply. Below, he saw 2 human beings and 3 animals. "God, I knew he'd try it," Long said, wondering to himself. "I thought he'd try it afoot, but the girl, and they're going to try to cross Death Flat?" His look of wonder increased, and he made no move toward the weapons in his holsters. "I wonder now," he mused. "Can they make it? I wonder." He scowled and he looked about with a frowning stare, and his gaze again shifted downward. Suddenly he shrugged and he put the wrong end of his unlighted cigar in his mouth. He mounted, and he rode slowly back towards the far-reaching stretches of desert. Once he halted and turned in his saddle for a backward look. "He had the makings of the worst bad man this country ever saw," he muttered aloud. "Now, if that woman and another country, but first they got to get across." On the western edge of a great ghastly plain of white, in which a deceiving distant glow was mirrored in the desert fawn, 2 figures, a man and a girl, stood hand in hand. 3 shaggy burros, heavily laden, stood behind them. The burros saw not the Death Flat ahead, for they were asleep. And the man and the girl saw not the frightful white, as of powdered skulls, bare, sinister, sun-baked, but a vision of a little house in a fragrant green meadow, with golden fields on either side of a peaceful river, and the forest ranging up the distant hills. Well, so that's the end of that story, and it looks like the coyote made it out of his bad times, at least for now. Love of a good woman and a chance to turn his life about. Well, that's a good story. So, folks, the next time I see you, we'll be around this campfire, and we're going to tell some more stories like we do. We got some Bigfoot stuff. We got all kinds of good stories. Come on back and talk to us. And until then, good night. This is Clay Steele.